very much for always making me feel very comfortable in NStQ territory. Like Rochelle says, I've been doing this since 2002, working with the NStQ Treaty team, and I've been fortunate to have seen quite a bit of your territory. It's just awesome. Before I move into my presentation, I do want to acknowledge Chief Patrick. I mean, and I'm sure all the other chiefs too would say the same thing. This is not easy work that's being done. There's a lot of history here, so I do want to acknowledge that. Since the new federal government's been in place roughly a year and a half, I mean, I think a lot of us have noticed changes towards reconciliation and more work with First Nations and Indigenous people. So in my presentation, I'm just going to share some ongoing work. It's obvious the BC Treaty process has taken a long time, and in the last couple of years, there's been some ongoing work to help improve the treaty process. Canada's efforts to build new relationships with Indigenous peoples, and plus some budget highlights, federal budget highlights, and treaty-related business funding initiatives. So you've probably heard this a few times, but the BC Treaty Commission has been around since 1992, and it was both governments, Canada, BC, and the First Nations Summit that developed this process to advance negotiations and facilitate fair and durable treaties. Since this process has taken such a long time, there was a multilateral engagement, that's just the name of the engagement, that was developed, and that's all about trying to find ways to improve the process. So there's always a purpose, and the purpose is to improve and expedite the negotiations, which I think we really need. And the three parties are represented again, the minister, our minister federally, the minister provincially, and the summit group. And the BC Treaty Commission, to my understanding, have been observers at all of these sessions also. Whenever you take on a big task like an engagement thing, you always need committees to oversee things and make sure the work gets done. So there's a seniors officials group and a technical working group that helps develop and vet the proposal. So there's a report containing quite a few of these proposals, and it's available publicly online. But essentially there's about 4 key areas: the scoping, a condensed agreement principle, process chapter language, and multi-year strategy. So when they talk about the scoping, it's basically key mandate, and when I say mandate, that's basically a government or a First Nation has instructions to do something. So in areas where they have instructions, for example, federally where it's land and cash, or FIS and fish and fiscal arrangements, those kinds of things, those are key areas where a lot of work's being done on. When they talk about a condensed agreement, that's looking at core elements, something like governance or fish, for example. Now, process chapter, that just means there's of the book that makes up a treaty, it's roughly 20 to 30 chapters. There's a few chapters in there that are quite standard. One that NStQ, for example, took many years developing with Canada was dispute resolution. So let's not reinvent the wheel, that's what that's talking about. If there's something there that doesn't need a whole bunch of work on it, then let's move past that. The multi-year strategy is essentially all three parties, Canada, BC, and NStQ, agreeing, for example, that we're at this stage, we're at an agreement principles stage now. How long should it take? When should we be moving into final agreement negotiations? Let's all agree and pick a date. Some of the options for stepping stones and moving forward, and one of them is in play here with NStQ is incremental treaty agreements. They provide and promote cooperative relations and remove barriers to treaty negotiations. Basically, it's an early deliverable, and there are incremental treaty agreements that are being actioned right now for NStQ, and that's with BC. And Canada's role in this is when we get the treaty, we cost share those lands, for example. Another option for stepping stones moving forward to treaty is they call them sectoral, or again, components, pre-existing groupings, so that you don't have to do the whole treaty all at once. That's another proposal brought forward. And it could be, again, speaking mainly from the federal area, it would be something like governance, child welfare, fish, those kinds of things. Core treaties are another suggestion where actually it would be constitutionally protected, and again, it would not be the full treaty, and it would be in areas of, from Canada's perspective, in areas of federal jurisdiction. These are just examples of things that that group has been studying, amongst other things. I'm not a lawyer, but this, I'm looking at Cliff over here because every time we need help from a lawyer on this one. Anyway, certainty is one of the key components of a treaty. And First Nations have long had an issue in treaties with the way governments have proposed to do certainty. I'm not going to read the whole thing here to you, but basically the old certainty technique was a non-assertion with a backup release. That's kind of like having belts and suspenders. Overkill. Canada has agreed to change the certainty process, and recently BC has come on side. So it's the first time in many years that we've all been on the same page moving forward with a modification technique that doesn't need that backup. That's the old modification technique. So we're moving forward for the first time with a technique that doesn't modify rights like it used to. And Canada is actually willing to go a little further. Again, this is technical and legal, but things change. And when there's reference to things like periodic review and order review process, that allows for the certainty model, which needs to be inflexible, to change over time. So we're willing to have that discussion with the province of BC and First Nations also. So that's kind of a large change that's happened recently. Now we can move on to, there's a lot of, again, with the new government, in light of Canada's commitment with Indigenous people and Métis groups, for example, there's a lot of groups that aren't in treaty, and they're looking for a more flexible approach to do reconciliation. So just recently, Canada has begun engaging in what they call exploratory discussions. You may hear other terms used with Indigenous groups in treaty and negotiation processes. Most of them are actually outside of the treaty. Any discussion with Canada on this would be basically limited in areas of federal jurisdiction. So, being that it's relatively new, it's kind of like an agreement in principle. It's without prejudice. It's the legal term saying that we still have lots of work to do and issues to sort out. And there isn't even any mandates yet for any of these groups that I'm aware of. So the instructions are basically, it's an early period of time where they're exploring these different groups. There's a number of them all across Canada that are exploring, trying to find ways to improve and make a commitment to move forward, negotiating whatever areas they all agree on. So that means developing, a time frame, a list of subjects that need to be agreed on, and it would be outside of the BC Treaty Process. Now, although most of these discussions are initiated on a bilateral basis, there is mechanism where we can involve the provinces or the territories across Canada. That's what all the parties desire. So these processes across Canada, there's a number of them, and while Canada has, for example, a mandate with NStQ to pursue treaty negotiations. You have an AIP mandate, and we're now obtaining instructions for a final agreement mandate. There is no mandates currently for any of these Indigenous groups across Canada that are involved in the exploratory discussions. I think the best way to say it is it's early times, and we don't really know how these things are going to unfold, but at least we're willing to have those discussions. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on the budget, just to say that, with the new government and, of course, the federal government, it takes time to make changes, but we are seeing some definite changes, even if you look at some of the highlights from the budget. Over $800 million to improve First Nation and Inuit outcomes and mental health services. $225 million over 11 years to improve housing. $89 million, almost $90 million over the next 3 years to preserve and protect and revitalize language and culture. These are just a few of the highlights. $165 million for post-secondary education and skills training. $90 million over 2 years for a student support program, and $24 million on an ongoing basis to support timely resolution of specific claims. So, as you can see, incrementally, these are recent budget highlights. There are some moves forward, and the NStQ Treaty and administration team, that you've got a great team working with you, and they'll find their way to get their share of this money. You do a great job. Another program that is related to treaties, where the funding is provided. It used to be a cost-share thing in Canada and BC. The last number of years, it's been Canada running program. It's basically a proposal-driven process where a group in treaty will apply for funding to do projects of helping treaty negotiations. I've been, over the years that I've been working with NStQ, I think just about every year since 2002, NStQ has gotten some of these treaty-related measures projects approved. Unfortunately, I want to acknowledge that last year, no matter how much we collaborated with NStQ, there wasn't any new funding for TRMs last year. There were some carryovers, but we do have some better news for this year. So, as you can see, it's over $2 million over the last, since 2001, and we've got quite a few projects. There were 2 really strong proposals put forward this year, and although there was tremendous competition for the funding that was there, and most projects didn't get the full amounts of funding that they asked for, NStQ did get their 2 proposals approved. So there was one for a range and resource scoping TRM to help with all the ranch and range issues, that kind of thing. And another one, which is a second phase of a governance type treaty-related measure, and it's solely focused on family services and research necessary to move forward with your taking down the child and family laws and that kind of thing that you're already doing great work on. So that's good news. The 2 that were applied for have been successful, and that's just in the last week. So I just want to reiterate that Canada's commitment to improvements to the treaty process and exploring alternatives through reconciliation, in no way does that undermine the work that's going on with NStQ treaty negotiations. We're really pleased with the milestones achieved, your successful agreement in principle vote, and a lot of the good work that your treaty team has been doing to move forward. So in my opinion, moving forward with treaty negotiations towards final agreement, which is, as you're hearing, is a very important objective and a milestone towards your own self-determination. So this has been 3 years now that governments, Canada, BC, and BCTC, have had the privilege of being invited to your Citizens Assembly. I've managed to make it for all 3 years. I really appreciate the invite. We've got a great new facility here and a wonderful forum to share with community members for 2 days every year. So thank you very much.
So, what Ray doesn't know is we're going to take just a couple of questions. Unfortunately, we don't have microphones that work, so hopefully you can use your outdoor voices inside. So if you have any questions, again, understand this is specifically on this. If there's not an answer for us today, we can always go back to our Treaty Commission and get them to come back with answers. So if you have any specific questions, we can take a couple right now. The floor is open.
I'm just wondering about what kind of stuff you guys have to do with BC Hydro and what kind of things you guys think about doing with renewable energy.
Okay, so the question was around BC Hydro and renewable energy. And again, we understand it's outside of your scope. We understand that, but if you can answer, that'd be great.
That sounds like a MLA Donna Barnett question. It's a BC question.
Well, she's coming up.
Yeah, I know. No, it's the federal, there's very few, I mean, essentially, because I'm now working for Canada, it's in federal jurisdiction, so it's only if there's federal land, that kind of thing. What Canada normally brings to treaty negotiation is money. And we cost share with BC. the land is provincial. Except for the Chilcote military trading area, that's one large piece of land that is federal property. So I can't directly answer your question now, provincial, but good question, thank you.
And great clarity, so we heard the answer on that one. We have time for one more question? All right, good. Thank you so very much. And know that if there's questions that pop up, you can always pop on over to our NStQ treaty team and drop off questions. I can always go into our next HIAM. I'm always looking for content, always wanting to address ideas. And I think a big theme of today is myth busting. So you have questions, looking for answers, looking for truth, looking to understand. Sometimes you hear a fact, but you're not quite sure how it all goes down. There's just a lot of information flying out there, so always feel free to drop off a question or ask a question directly to staff, and they, if they think it's to a greater audience, they'll make sure it's in the line. So, as you heard in our agenda, we did have Jerry Lambert. Unfortunately, he's not well today, and so his colleague, Miriam Moore, who's new to the team, process advisor, and works at the NStQ table for the BC Treaty Commission. So I'm going to call you on down. Price is right. Come on down. Let's show her some love for stepping up last minute. On behalf of my colleagues, so you can have some answers. Thank So for our staff, just FYI, there is a PowerPoint presentation as well that they'll still be using. So if that could be handed up, that'd be great. We're just going to pull it up.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Russell, and thank you to the chiefs and citizens and everyone for having us here. Again, unfortunately, Jerry Lampert was unable to be here today, but he does send his regrets and hopes to be able to attend in the future. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in the Yukon, where 11 of the 14 nations signed modern treaties back in the 90s. So that's where a lot of my background and understanding of treaty comes from and the importance. So I'm really grateful to be here on NStQ territory and speaking with you a little bit today about the modern treaty process in BC and where it's at right now, and specifically where NStQ is at and where you may be going in the future. So just a little brief introduction. BC Treaty Commission, I'm sure you've all heard, we're the independent facilitator for treaty negotiations. So my role as the process advisor, I'm supporting the table and seeing that all move forward. So just a brief overview of the negotiations in general. In BC, there are 8 nations currently implementing treaties. So there's the 5 Manault nations, the Tsawwassen Nation, most recently the Sliama Nation, who just celebrated their 1-year anniversary of self-government, and then NStQ, which was negotiated in a separate process than this process. And then, so there's a map up there, I hope that you can see it or you have it in front of you. And so that shows the territories of First Nations that are implementing treaties or they're in advanced negotiations. And it covers approximately 1/3 of British Columbia. And if you can see there, number 17 in the page does show NStQ's territory. So as I'm sure you all know, it is a 6-stage process, the BC Treaty Process. And NStQ, congratulations, recently last year, is transitioning from stage 4 into stage 5. So that's what we're showing up there. So finish the AIP and moving into that final agreement phase. So we did just want to acknowledge that there are certainly some challenges that come along with the BC Treaty Process, but there are also a lot of opportunities. So some of the challenges that I'm I know NStQ has faced and is dealing with are the challenges of getting and maintaining mandates from the governments, as well as the slow timelines in the treaty negotiations process. But there are a lot of opportunities to counter those challenges and to move forward. A lot of them relate to what Ray spoke to with the multilateral engagement report. In particular, one could be a multi-year work plan for Stage 5. So that's a work plan that the leadership from all three parties, so Canada, BC, and NStQ, would sign off on, that would set dates for Stage 5. So if that was an option that NStQ wished to consider, that would be, NStQ would be one of the first tables to adopt this strategy and moving forward. And that could be one way to counter some of the challenges within the treaty negotiations process. And I did just want to share as well a few words from Treaty First Nations who talk about how treaty has helped them to achieve self-determination. So there's Willamette Nation, who are now the largest landholder in the Powell River region. There's a word from their Hagoose, Clint Williams there, who talks about how treaty gave them a new set of tools they never had available to them before. There's also John Jack from the Hawaiian First Nation, who speaks about how, again, treaty provides tools to go in any direction. And another of the, Hawaiian is one of the mountainous nations, and another of them, Tilquat, now owns and governs 42 kilometers of waterfront lands, and they purchased a forest company with a forest license that covers almost the whole of their territory. So these are some of the opportunities that come with treaty. There's also the Niska Nation who speak about how they never extinguished their rights, they perfected them and they're protected. So again, these are some of the opportunities in treaty that we see. Just briefly, I wanted to touch on moving forward. NStQ is about to enter a stage with a lot of momentum. So there was the AIP signing coming up and then moving into final agreement. And after the election, BCTC is going to continue to push BC and Canada to meet NStQ in ratifying the AIP and moving forward into that next phase. It will be a really significant milestone, and then the table will begin those final agreement negotiations. And I just wanted to speak, we looked through the NStQ vision and each of the four nations' vision statements, and we really feel that the treaties provide a strong foundation for NStQ to achieve that vision, whether it's independent First Nations government, land and resource management, economic benefits, strengthening and protecting Secwepemc culture. All of those things are tools that can be achieved through treaty. And I just wanted to say that we really appreciate again being here. I look forward to being back in your territory in the future. I do have a lot of materials on that side table there, so I'll be leaving them there for tomorrow as well. If you wanted to pick up any information or some swag, we have that available over there for some additional information. Thank you all very much.